Oh, wait, you're back. Oh, I thought you were leaving me forever. Welcome back to another Flash action script tutorial. What we're going to be creating today is a way for our players or our users to submit input. So things like their name, like if they got a high score, or just to submit their score, whatever they might possibly want to submit. So this is what we're going to end up with. I'm going to start by creating a new ActionScript 3.0 document and go ahead and save it as user input video. And I'm going to save. I already have one that exists, so I'm just going to replace mine. You should not have one yet. Oh, it's already opened another window. All right, Flash, stop being mean to me. So to get started, we're going to need a couple of things, right? We're going to need a couple different types of text boxes. But before I do anything, I'm going to be using Times New Roman. And remember, that's not one of those top 3 fonts up here. So I'm just going to click on Embed. And now I'm going to give it a name. I'll just say Main Font. And you see it still says Times New Roman, styles regular. Now I'm just going to click all and click OK. So let's take some static text and let's create some labels first. So over here, I'm just going to click and type in user input. And then if I hit escape, it'll exit out of that text box from typing. I'm going to click over here and I'm going to say what was submitted by the user, question mark. Hit the escape key to get out of that. And now these two are set to static text. So the other two parts we need in terms of text are a dynamic text box or text field and an input text field. So let's go ahead and create our input text field. So I've set it equal to, or the type to input text. Now I'm just going to click right here and hit the escape key, and that's about all I need. I just need some place for the user to insert their input text. But I want to make sure that the user can see it, so make sure that you have the show border around text box checked, and that you can actually see a border around your user input. So the next step is to create a dynamic text box or text field, whatever you want to call it. Same thing, make sure that you have show border around text checked, and make sure that selectable is not checked. We do not want this to be selectable. So, and also make sure your behavior is set to single line. So I'm going to type right here, or just actually click, and now I have a nice little text box that is dynamic text. So I should have static text here, static text here. On the input text, make sure your behavior is set to single line as well with a border. I can see it's input text. Here's the border. And then our dynamic text here should have a border, not be selectable, and should also be single line as the behavior. So once you have that all set up, we need to give our text boxes some instance names. So static text, you cannot give an instance name, so we don't have to worry about those. Our input text and our dynamic text needs to be given an instance name. So the input text, I'm going to call it txt, which is just kind of short for text field, and then the word input, so we know that it's the input, and click away. Then I'm going to click on my dynamic text and set the instance name to txt submitted, because the user is going to submit their input to there. So let's go ahead and just stretch these out a bit so that you have a little more room for the user to type. So stretched it out, and let's get these looking nice and pretty. So I'm going to select my user input and my input text, go to my align tool, and I don't want it aligned to stage, I want it aligned to horizontal center, just so it's centered over each other. Same thing for dynamic our dynamic text. So there we go. It's all nice and pretty. Let's do just a little bit more aligning. Let's select both of our static text, align them vertically, and let's align our text boxes vertically as well. Click, click, click. Okay. So now we have something along the lines of what we want to do. And if everything is correct, you should be able to type in your input text, and you should not be able to do anything else with any of your other text. So far, so good. I'm going to save. The next two pieces that we need are buttons. So we're going to create two buttons. So I'm going to begin by saying insert, new symbol, make sure you have type set to button, and I'm going to call this submit button. I'm going to click OK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my rectangle tool, make sure I have no stroke, set my fill color to black, and change my rectangle option so that the corners are rounded to 30. So now if I click and drag, I have a nice little button looking thing going on. Now if I select this all, I'm going to go to my align tool, make sure align to stage is checked, and I'm going to center it horizontally and center it vertically. So now that we have that, let's rename this layer to base, because that's where we have our base, right? And the next step is create a new layer, call it text, and on this text layer, so lock your base layer if you have to, we're going to use our text tool. I'm going to switch to white as my fill color, make sure I have static text, and now I'm going to type the word submit. And I don't like how small that is, so I'm going to make it just a little bigger. Oops. Go to my selection tool, click on it, change the size to, let's say, 56. Maybe like 72. 72 will work for me. And now I'm going to do is go to my align tool, make sure align to stage is checked, align it to the center. So now I have submit and I have a nice little button. But there's a couple more things I need to do. So I need to put keyframes, or I need to extend the frame to the over frame because, well, when it's over, it needs to have something to do as well. So right click, click insert frame so that we get our up frame extended onto our over frame. Our down frame, if you remember, we're going to, how we did with our glossy buttons, we made it move down. We're going to do that as well. So let's extend our base all the way out to, let's put a keyframe on hit. So now we have our base, our hit. This is where we're going to be able to click on our button. On the down frame, we're going to insert a keyframe on base, and we're going to insert a keyframe on text. So now this keyframe on our up frame is shared between up and over, and our hit frame only has base on it. So on our down frame, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure all of our layers are unlocked. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to hold down the shift key and press the down arrow so that it goes down just a little bit. So I'm going to go back onto our stage or our scene, and I'm going to add this button on just from our library. Click and drag it on. It's a little big, but don't worry about it for now. I'm going to test it. So if I hover over, nothing should happen. When I click on it, it should move down a little bit. So my button's working. There I go, nice and pretty. So the next thing we're going to do is we need another button. So we need a clear button in case, well, the user started typing stuff and they wanted to clear out their text boxes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our library, and I'm going to show you something that maybe you know, maybe you haven't figured out quite yet. If you take your submit button that we have in our library and right click, there's an option for duplicate. So I'm going to duplicate my button. So give it a new name. It's going to be called clear button. And now in my library, I have two separate buttons. I have submit button and clear button, although my clear button looks exactly the same as my submit button. So let's change that. I'm going to click on clear button, and then I'm going to double click on the image here so that I go inside of my clear button. And this button is going to be for clearing. So we don't want it to say submit anymore. We want it to say clear. So what we're going to do is go into our text layer, use our text tool, and I'm going to click on this up frame here. And I'm just going to select everything we have in here and type in clear instead of submit. And then we're going to go to our align tool, align to stage, center it up nice and pretty. Same thing on our down frame. So we go to our down frame. Let's select our text, type in clear instead. And now for this one, when we align, we don't want to align it horizontally or sorry, we don't want to align it to the vertical center. We only want to align it to the horizontal center of our stage. Because if we align it vertically, it's going to go back up and it's not going to be lined up with our button. So the only aligning we're doing for this is the horizontal center. So there we go. So now if we go back into our main stage, go to our library, you see we have two buttons. We have clear and submit. And let's add in our clear button to the bottom. Let's drag this stuff up just a little bit. And actually, let's select these two here. Make sure align to stage is checked and align them to the center of your stage. Now let's run and see what's going on. So I can click submit and it goes up and down. I can click clear and it goes up and down. But you can see these things are kind of overlapping a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to select them both with our selection tool. And then use the free transform tool. And now if I hold down shift and hold down the alt key, it's going to grab a corner, it's going to shrink them down and shrink them around the center. So there you go, it's a little smaller now. And now I'm just going to take my clear button, hold down shift and tap the down arrow to drop it down just a little bit. And now if I run, my submit button does not overlap my clear button. So let's go ahead and name this layer art, because it's for making art, right? All our art's on here. Actually, I'm going to align this just a little bit. I don't like how close to the edge that is. So I'm just going to tap the left arrow key a couple times so it's not so close to the edge. And there I go. So I'm going to save, make sure everything's nice and pretty. And now we need to we gave our text, our input text, the instance name of txt input. We gave our dynamic text the instance name of txt submitted. But now let's give our buttons some instance name so we can access them later with code. So I'm going to click on the submit button with my selection tool, go up to the instance name and type btn, which is short for button, and then the word submit. And I'm going to click on the clear button and type btn clear. So once we have that, we're pretty well set up, but I want to do one more thing. So I'm going to lock the art layer, create a new layer, drag it below our art layer, and we're going to rename this to background. Or since it doesn't fit completely, you can just say BG, whatever you want to call it. It's fine, just have it say something along the lines of background. And I'm going to hide my art layer because it's in the way, and I'm going to create a fanciful background for your viewing pleasure. So I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, reset these rounded corners so that they're not rounded anymore. It's a regular rectangle. And I'm going to change my fill color to be a gradient from black to white. And if you want to use another gradient, that's fine. I'm using this one because I know it works. So I'm just going to click and drag and get some kind of rectangle on the screen. I'm going to select it using the selection tool. And make sure you don't have any kind of stroke around this, okay? So I'm going to select it with my selection tool, going to the align panel, and I'm going to make sure it's aligned to the stage, and I'm going to go under match size. I'm going to match the width and height of the stage. So now my rectangle is the exact same height and width as my stage, but it's not aligned in the center. So under align, we have align horizontal center and align vertical center. And now it perfectly covers our background. But I don't want the gradient to go from left to right. I want it to go from top to bottom. So I'm going to take, underneath my free transform tool, just click and hold, use the gradient transform tool, click on my rectangle, and now I'm going to rotate this. So I'm going to find this little option for rotate right here. I'm going to click. I'm going to hold down shift. Shift usually snaps. Maybe it doesn't if you don't have certain things set. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate it so that it is going from top to bottom. And I'm going to shrink it down so that it actually fits our stage. So once we've done that, I'm going to save. I'm going to lock my background layer. I'm going to unhide my art layer. This is what we have right now. So I'm going to unlock my art layer again, and there we go. Everything's nice and settled on that layer. I'm going to move these text boxes over just one more time. That is bothering me so much. So now if I save, we're good. So the last and final step we're going to take in this is actually putting in some code to have to be able to submit input. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call it actions. Yes, you understand. I'm going to lock the actions layer so I don't actually accidentally draw anything on it. So I'm going to click on my frame, tap F9, bring this over here so you can actually see it. And now we can start coding. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mouse click event listener to my submit button. And if you remember, I named the submit button btn submit. So I'm going to go under actions, make sure I'm on the right frame here, make sure I'm on the frame and layer. Go under actions, type in btn submit dot add event listener, give it the type we're listening for, the mouse event dot click. And let me resize this really quick for you. So we're going to add the mouse event dot click, and we're going to call this submit input. That's the function we're going to be calling. So end with the parentheses, end with the semicolon. So the next part we need is to create our function. So we're going to create a function, make sure it has the same name of submit input. The type it's going to be listening for is a mouse event, and the parentheses, and it's not going to be returning any kind of data, so we're just going to say void. Then put our curly brackets. And now that we have it set up, what do we want to do? Well, when we submit our input, well, first let's even find out what's in the user input, right? So let's just go ahead and, well, what did we name our user input? We named it txt input. So I'm going to say, just make sure we're on the right frame with our actions. I'm going to go ahead and say trace txt input dot text, because we're going to pull whatever's in that text field, and end with the semicolon. But that's not enough. We want a little bit of a label to help us out. So let's go before txt input and put user submitted, put a colon just because it's nice and pretty, and our double quote, and remember to put the plus sign so that we're concatenating our strings. So I'm going to save and I'm going to run, and now every time I click submit, if I did this correctly, I did, it's just not showing. Every time I click submit, you can see it saying user submitted whatever in the user input. And because there's nothing there, nothing's showing up in the output, so let's type something. Mr. Davis is the best, right? Yeah, okay, sure. Click submit. Now it's saying user submitted, Mr. Davis is the best. And if I change this to Mr. Davis is not the best, submit again, it says not the best. Okay, that's not the truth, so let's keep working, right? So the next part we're going to do, let's put some comments really quick. So the very top, the very top, we're going to put, what are we going to put? User input video. Remember, don't worry about these import statements if they pop up. What are we doing here? Add listener for mouse click to submit button. And then down here, we're going to say submit user input with an exclamation point because we're happy. So what we need to do is we need to set whatever our dynamic text box was to whatever the input text was. So if you remember, we named our dynamic text box txt submitted. Go under actions, timeline, make sure you're under the right frame. If you're not on the right frame, it's not going to work. And let's go ahead and say txt submitted.text equals txt input.text, and then end the line. So save, run our program, and now when I type out whatever, click submit, it's going to pop up in this other text box. And if I change it to something else, every time I click submit, it's going to change it over there as well. So the very last part is our clear button. We want to be able to clear out this text when we're done with it. So it's very similar to what we've done before. We're just going to say btn clear. I believe that's what we called it. Let me just double check. Clear. Yep, we called it btn clear. Make sure you're on the right frame. btn clear dot add event listener. We're listening for the mouse event dot click. Oops, make sure click is all uppercase. And then the function is going to be called clear data, or let's call it clear text. So end with a parentheses and end with a semicolon. So let's put a comment, add listener for mouse click to clear button. And below our submit input function, let's put another function called function clear text, just like we named it up above. Sorry, not test, text. And then what we're going to do is tell it the type. So we're expecting mouse event. And then we're returning type void. Then our curly brackets. So now what we're going to do, if you could possibly imagine, we're going to clear out the buttons that it's not the buttons, the text that we already have. So we're going to set txt input equal to double quote, which is just blank because there's nothing in between our double quotes. Oops, and made a mistake. Txt input dot text. Remember, if you don't do it that way, it's not going to work. So in the very last thing is we set our txt submitted dot text equal to the same thing as well. So we're going to save and we're going to run. And now if I type stuff in user input and click submit, it should copy over. And when I click clear, it clears out both text boxes. And that's a way we can submit player names, I don't know, name characters in our game, whatever you want to do. That's the way to pull it from the player, the user sitting at their keyboard, and then push it into your game. So that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.